I attended the US Book Show 2025, and this video is specifically the panel on audiobooks, which I thought was really fascinating. Among other things, they get into the impact of AI on audiobooks with a lot of nuance, and I hope you enjoy it. I think if you're an audiobook listener, this is definitely worth listening to.
$2.2 billion of audiobooks sold with 13% growth. Oh, the market is cooling. I am sure did that send a chill down your spine? Or how do you feel about those numbers? You feel that they're on the rise? Are we still excited about the audiobook market? And what's got you most excited about it?
I'm in my job because people are excited about the audiobook market. I have sort of an interesting background, and I feel like even just kind of in the green room, everyone talking about how collegial audiobooks have been, how everyone has been in the audiobook industry for years and years. I've been in the audiobook industry for 7 months. I came from the print traditional side. I ran a independent publishing company called Polis Books. Before that, I worked in editorial and marketing at Warner Books back when it was Warner Books. My very first boss had a Rolodex. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it and then crumble into dust. But I came through the editorial and marketing ranks. But what I did was I focused on acquisitions and working with authors and finding talent and kind of looking for authors that were maybe under the radar or bubbling up under the surface or sort of getting ready to break out. So I think one thing audio has shown over the past, 5 to 10 years is that this is not just a kind of, a secondary format. We're not just publishing audiobooks of books that our publishers are doing. We're looking for authors who are going to break out in this format, that are doing things non-traditionally. And there are people listening to audiobooks that do not read in print or ebook. And it's hugely exciting for me because it opens up these incredible stories and writers that would not have been found otherwise. So to me, audiobooks are the same as traditional publishing because you're still looking for writers that are doing incredible things. So to me, it's hugely exciting, and I love it because it's the same, but it's different.
Jessica, you've been nodding your head through that
I love everything he's saying. I'm excited because More Black Press, I press with my agent and my partner, Regina Brooks, is that's exactly what we're doing with the authors that I press. And I came into publishing a different kind of way because I'm a poet and I make a living actually with my voice and speaking on microphones and speaking the things that I write into existence, into audiences. And I understood the power of audio, and I knew that that's been a big part of my 30-year career as a poet that's performed everywhere, that books are important. So I started a publishing house. I could have started a spoken word record label. And instead, I started publishing the poets of the roaring 90s out of New York City. My first poet was Saul Williams. So we weren't even doing audiobooks back then. You think I wouldn't have done Saul's audiobook, And so I didn't. But now we're backtracking, saying, oh, wait a minute. This is a real viable thing as an artist for me to have an audiobook. It's very different for me because I also fought for the spoken word Grammy to get away from separate audiobook from performance artists, because when I am doing my audiobook, I'm also performing, but I'm not getting paid as a performer. So there's something that we need to work on. There's nuance to it. If you give if Blair Underwood is reading the book, you're going to give him a big check. But if I'm reading my book, you're going to try to act like I'm just an author reading a book. And there is a big difference between an author that's doing a reading of their book. I've done both, and someone who's performing. So audio right now in Black and Brown communities in particular, it's 1:1 is the ratio of people who are buying print books are also buying the audio. And so in my community, and from where the community that really loves my work, especially women too, they are really listening listening for books, listening for voices more than they are going into bookstores and buying them. So, or about at the same level.
And Ed, you just asked, are we peaking? We've only just begun.
Okay.
And that's the great thing about audiobooks right now. 50% of the United States has still never listened to an audiobook.
Yeah, it was 51% had, and so it's 49%.
Okay, well, we'll take it. Thank you for fact checking me.
Just information,
It's okay, that means that we're improving.
135 million adults had listened to audiobooks this past year.
But I do think the work everyone is doing up here is exposing literature to different people who never picked up books before, and I think that's really important.
Well, you work in production side, so what has changed in the last? I don't even care about what's changed. What are we looking at next?
What are we looking at next? It's hard to say. I mean, I would tell you right now, currently, the thing that's really interesting and to us, I mean, you saw the commercial that Lee had up there, which is probably like my entire production budget for the year. But, you know, I think authors right now are as focused on audio as they are in print when they're starting, right? When we acquire a book 2 years in advance of publishing it, you know, we're talking about audio. That's part of the conversation. When we published Bono's memoir, Surrender, we were sitting in the room talking about like how special that audiobook can be. And I think that's only going to enhance the creativity of what we're actually acquiring in the future. And also just say, you know, Audible's done a really great job with original audio. We've done quite a few original audiobooks, scripted audio, narrative audio. I think that's the future, more scripted audio.
Well, that Bono book is the type of book that is even better listened to than necessarily read, because he's allowed to use, he has the rights to that music. So he's got a lot of music in that book. There's a lot of lyrics that would have cost a fortune for anybody else. And source books, you guys have done some really cool stuff in audio. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that, because source books have some really hot titles.
Well, thank you. So I think that just the growth of the market, it's also why I have my job. So Sourcebooks has been around for almost 40 years. All of our content was making it into audio. It was just going through outside audio publishers. So knowing that we wanted to really create a cohesive experience for our authors, they were like, we need to start doing this in-house. So that's what we've been launching for the past 6 months. It's going great. And like Dan was saying, audio is so front of mind for authors and agents and just for the overall experience that we want people to find our books in whatever format they want it in, and then also creating those really like dynamic and comprehensive listening experiences. So I'm very excited for starting next year, going a little bit more into like the kids list and a lot of like traditionally illustrated content and how you can create an immersive listening experience there, and like really capturing young readers and making sure that they're not becoming lapsed readers who have to come back to it as adults, that we're just carrying on with them.
Just if you don't mind unpacking that just a tiny bit, how do you make the visual experience into one that's auditory?
Oh man, so many pieces. I mean, audio really takes a village. And so I think that, you know, it's working directly with the authors to begin to describe and script out what the images are. And then working, you know, with sound engineers and with the directors, making sure that there's like the right pauses, creating a soundscape that is like indicative of what is happening, but not distracting, because I don't think people are necessarily looking for a movie that they're watching with their eyes closed. Like when you come to an audiobook, it's for a different experience.
And kids have a different type of imagination than adults, right? So you can play with that elasticity that they have and the lack of, say, you know, reliance on factual, you know, they're not as cynical.
Exactly, got to keep the imagination alive.
I mean, to be blunt. And Lee, you're in a unique position as both a retailer and a producer and a maker of extraordinary commercials. Often show night sports events where my team loses. Thank you for that. Tell us a little bit more about what's the latest happening with Audible, because you're in a unique position, obviously, as the leading market retailer for Audible.
Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing the growth that the APA reported. One interesting stat is that over the past 10 years, we've had our member base grow by 800%, which is kind of just mind-blowing. We don't see it slowing down. 2024 was one of our best years. I think a lot of the things that this panel has already touched on, you know, immersive sound design, kids listening, are things where we're going to see massive growth in the coming years. We're working on new productions of Harry Potter, and we've got images of them recording a steam engine for the Hogwarts Express. They went out on location and like did a whole bunch of sound capture, and it's just so cool. And also, it's going to keep my kids entertained in the car for a good 80-something hours. So I'm looking forward to that.
And Ed, just to jump in, you know, I know we're talking a lot about immersive audio because it's flashy and it's fun and it's very Hollywood, but oral storytelling is the ancient art of storytelling. It's the first form of storytelling. And let's not sleep on the fact that there's still single voice narrators that are kind of the bread and butter of this business that can tell really beautiful stories without music and sound design, etc.
Well, there's been a previous panelist at a previous event said to me, just because you can do it doesn't mean that the audience wants you to do it. There's certainly an audience for traditional, straight up, single narrator storytelling. I mean, we're seeing, I'm gonna just get this out of the way. One of the things we're seeing is disruption with AI. It's been the big subject. Speechify, for example, I can have Snoop Dogg read my email to me. And certainly we've seen a lot of talk about AI. Does anybody want to weigh in on this? And I'm going to start with our poets, because this is the one area, and I know Regina said this several times, Regina Brooks, who's in the audience and is your partner in this, that AI does not do diverse voices. I'm
I don't know, AI can't write a good Jessica Caramore poem. It's tried. And so, you know, I am an artist I'm trying to not be afraid of AI. I was at the AI panel earlier. And for creatives, it is a scary space. And I think that what we have to do is just kind of get involved because AI is not going anywhere, unfortunately, even though there are some environmental things that are in question right now when it comes to AI and the space it's taking up to make these AI things keep going. You know, I just think we have to get away from the fear. I don't really walk in fear in my life or in my art as well. And so finding ways to make AI work for me is the plan. It's like use it to add value to what I already do, but not to replace it.
Now, if anybody wants to weigh in on this, because one of the strategies is to use AI to essentially test the market. So if you start to see traction for books, say backlist that hasn't been able to that's too expensive to produce in natural voices and audio, to test AI voices, does anybody have a stand or a take on that particular approach?
I mean, I've always said, and I'm looking at Lee because he can talk about AI, I think, in great detail, given the announcement last week. But I think one of the things that has come up in my career over the last 6-7 years when AI companies have come to talk to us about AI voices, like, where were you guys 25 years ago when we were struggling to produce thousands of audiobooks in our backlist? And now there is no backlist. We've produced everything with a human voice, and frankly, I wouldn't want to replace that in the future.
I will say that, you know, Audible itself is very much always going to hold in the highest regard human narration, and that is key to just about everything we do. But we do see use cases for AI that can be beneficial for all parties. You know, you can take something from like search. We have an AI search that is called Maven that allows people to use natural language to say, oh, I'm going to be in the car for 8 hours with my kids and I need a book with a female protagonist that has a little bit of excitement and action to it. And the search will generate something that is actually of great interest that will be useful for being able to find that stuff that maybe wasn't as easy to find before. Of course, in our industry, the big hot topics are things like AI narration. And I think, look, some estimate that there's about 97% of titles in the world that don't have an audiobook. And for me, I think that's a shame. I think we should make those titles accessible to everyone, especially those who maybe use audio as their primary format for listening to audiobooks. And so one tool to do that would be AI. And so one thing that I've been excited about is the voice replica technology that we've released, which allows narrators to actually control and leverage the technology to create more content when they're not able to be in the studio 24/7. But they get to, say, 100% control over what they're creating and how it's used. And I think that's an example of a way we can both help authors get more content into audio, help narrators get more work.
I think there's also some really good examples recently of AI technology being leveraged, similar to what Lee is talking about.
Melania's book?
No. We just published a book by Ely Callaway, who's built Callaway Golf. And he passed away over 20 years ago. And his son wanted to produce an audiobook after he passed away, a memoir in his voice. So he wrote this memoir. He had an actor record it and then generated Ely's voice from a lot of recordings that he had and overlaid it over the voice. And there's nothing like that. Being able to hear Ely Callaway tell his story 20 years after he's passed on, I think that's a really creative, interesting way of leveraging.
Well, that was the first thing I thought about with Audible's announcement, that what's the chance that we're going to hear an audio version of Hemingway doing Hemingway, or Eliot doing Eliot, or whomever we have, Churchill doing Churchill. I'm only thinking of male examples because that's what come to mind, and I apologize about that, but
Yeah, I mean, I think
Sylvia
it's going to be much
Sylvia
more
Plath.
prevalent.
Maya Angelou doing Maya Angelou. She's still with us. Tony doing Tony.
So I mean, I would say, so I work with a lot of authors who are coming from the independent or self-published and hybrid spaces, and there's a huge concern in that community that a lot of these people came from non-traditional sides. They scratched and clawed and found readerships and built readerships, whether it's in print or ebooks. Sometimes they build audio on their own. And there's an enormous concern that this foothold that they've gotten within the industry might be taken away by AI. I think there is an understanding that AI is not going anywhere. So to me, it's how do you strike this balance between respecting the artist, both in terms of the writers and the narrators too? Because one thing I'll say that I certainly know and they know too, is that a lot of these narrators come with fan bases of their own. We make announcements for narrators for audiobooks. They're huge. They're big sales and marketing tools for us. To the best of my knowledge, AI voices don't have fan bases just yet. So I don't think we want to, how do we balance respecting the authors and their works with understanding this technology is going to be here whether we like it or not? And like they said, there are so many books out there that could be used by other people to their benefits. Maybe it's for study usage. Maybe it's just people who have sight issues who need an audiobook and there's no other way to produce them. And so I think the trick is going to be, how do you balance respecting the art with finding a way to put these books into audio where they can be discovered by people who would have no other way to discover them? I don't think there's a definitive answer to it yet, but I think that's what everybody wants, is to respect the art, but use the technology in a way that's not going to harm these creator communities.
I was going to say, because I know Catherine, Sourcebooks has had a lot of success promoting narrators and really almost to the at the same level of some of the authors, because you have high volume listeners who are really invested in the success of their authors and subsequently the narrators. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a really fun test case recently, a book that came out a few weeks ago, The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. The author had a very specific voice in her head. I think we sent her 200 samples and she was like, no, that's not it. And she was like, do you know what? I have this huge platform. She put out a call and was like, anyone love my books that you think that you can embody this character? Send me a sample. And that's how we found our narrator. So I think that really leaning into these audiences and still being able to find new voices, even in like a really robust actor community, it's something to really consider. And just quickly going back to the AI thing, I think it's so important to separate out artificial voice from AI tools. Like, I think that some of the tools to, improve QC, which just creates a better listening experience, it like opens up the people to do the creative work and kind of remove some of the manual pieces. And so that, at least for right now, is really how we're leaning into it.
Yeah, doing re-records and spot corrections and all of that is much more fluid with AI tools for sure. Can we talk? One of the other areas that we can talk about, and I'm curious, maybe Lee and yourself can address this, is about cannibalization. There was always that concern that the growth for every book that was sold as audio was not a print book sold. I think since the relationship is so direct with Amazon, as a print retailer, how would you guys address this internally? Are there conversations about this? Is there a relationship with the other company?
Yeah, well, luckily I would say in recent years, like all my publishing partners who I work with, they understand that there really is no cannibalization. Something like 79% of people who listen to audiobooks also read ebooks or ebooks. So we think it's a very healthy overall industry where people who are listening more actually read more and they benefit each other. I'll also say for audio, as most of you probably know, a lot of audio listening happens while you simply could not be reading, driving a car, walking the dog, doing dishes, doing laundry. So I really do think they're very complementary formats and overall help the publishing industry.
You guys have a very cool commercial about a fellow vacuuming who's fighting demons. How about within Simon & Schuster? How does it feel over there about that?
Well, first of all, it's news to me that I shouldn't be reading a book while driving. I guess I'm happy. No, I think, first of all, the growth of audio dovetails almost perfectly with sort of the contraction of the way that books are found in discovery. Book review sections have been gutted. The ways that books used to be covered have been slashed to the bone, and it's been up to, I guess, a lot of times readers and authors to find these communities because we can't depend on these traditional outlets anymore. And I think there are a lot of books and genres that are being discovered now that we're not getting kind of seen in traditional media and traditional marketing. And these are books that wouldn't have been in print, wouldn't have been in ebook traditionally anyway, and they're being discovered through audio. So I don't know if in terms of cannibalization, I can just say that there are genres that are enormously successful in audio that really did not have print or ebook components. So it's, to me, you're just exposing all these different stories and storytellers writing things that 10 years ago, they would have been selling copies out of the trunk of their car. Audiences is in audiobooks. Problems create solutions, and I think that's the solution, people finding audiences because there isn't as much traditional way to get it out there.
But I think this is complicated to some extent. I'd be curious if anybody could answer this, because one of the companies that's not represented on the stage is Spotify. And Spotify has laid claim, for better or worse, to helping grow the market, particularly among young readers or young listeners. This is something that they say publicly. It's on the record over and over again. But if I search in my Spotify app and I pay for premium for All Fours by Miranda July, I'm going to get the book as an option to listen to, and I'll get my free 15 hours to listen. I can buy it, but I'm also going to get every single time she spoke about that book on a podcast. I'm going to get every commentary. So again, there's a sort of, I can discover the book, but I'm also going to be able to, discover everything else. And I'm picking fiction deliberately, because if I do nonfiction, for example, the new book on Apple in China, if I search for that book, I can pretty much listen to the author tell me everything that's already in that book on any number of podcasts. So does that create a distorted market where sometimes, for example, a Spotify as a platform can be drawing some attention both to the book but away from the book at the same time? A push-pull situation?
No, I can't stand Spotify. So I have to say that now, no independent artists. I mean, and I'm on Spotify.
That's fair enough.
They make a lot of money off people like me and don't give us the money. And so the publishing space where audiobooks may be different, but also as a recording artist, which I am that too. So you can search my name in there, you're going to find it. I mean, I can have 1 billion listens on something. So I mean, we're talking about maybe it's doing something great for the market. I don't know if it's doing something great for the artist. I don't see any money from that. Pennies literally.
Yeah.
Please, that's nowhere.
How's that contract looking, David? I mean, they're coming up for renewal.
Well, I'm not getting involved in that.
Okay, fair.
That's not. I make the books.
The Spotify contracts are coming up, I think, in October, right?
Listen, I think what I've noticed with Spotify is that people that I know that don't listen to books, but listen to tons of music on Spotify, all of a sudden started picking up books on Spotify that I produced 25 years ago. Like, one of their better selling books was Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. And we're sitting there scratching our heads like, who are buying this? Who are the people buying this book? And I think what it's doing is drawing a lot of attention to audiobooks from people who never would have picked up an audiobook before. And I think that's good for everyone. I think there's a lot of people that would have gone to Spotify and listened to the Beastie Boys audiobook because it's such a unique experience, and then went and picked up this beautifully designed coffee table book. And I think that's good. That lifts all boats for publishing, for authors across the board.
In the acquisition process for publishing, where does audio, rank on the table? Are there instances where we're looking at it as the number one option over print? Yeah. I mean, I know that that's increasingly the case because obviously we're seeing paperbacks still under debate. The price of hardcovers has gotten to be astronomical for many people, let's be honest. I don't think that's unfair. Inflation is inflation. But where does audio fit? Because audio is often seen where before it was a library format, and if you were a consumer, it was a very expensive format on cassette or CD, and now it's equally priced to typically an ebook.
I think it's just created kind of a more holistic view earlier on, and it's not a really one-size-fits-all model, also within the APA stats, which I haven't had a chance to read all the way through, and I don't want to be fact-checked in front of this great crowd. So I don't know the exact proportions, but kind of what people listen to and where audio has a higher, listenership than people reading with their eyes. Like, it's so dependent on the book. So I think it's very front of mind for acquisitions, and it certainly runs the finance teams through their paces as they try and, predict forward. But I think it's just great because ultimately we just want people coming to our books and sort of however they come to them. In that way, I'm very format agnostic. Like, if someone's choosing to spend their free time on one of your books, you can read, you can listen, you can do everything in between and both. And I feel like that's kind of the victory in and of itself.
Well, if I could just jump in, I know for sure for me and Regina and More Black Press, Harper, Amistad is a requirement. So our authors that we're publishing, Brad Walron's Everywhere Alien, and we have Barbara Fant, a wonderful poet out of Columbus, Ohio, coming out in the fall. Like, these are poets who read very well on the microphones, and they believe in audience, and we're living for those kind of writers and poets. So we're a press that's looking for people who are.
You want multi-talent. We want
like little baby bees all over the place. Yeah. So like people who like record, who work with full bands, interdisciplinary, put visuals on top of it, who work with rock and roll. Maybe you were a jazz poet. Yeah, we want all that.
But that definitely goes to the way that being authorship is itself changing. I mean, before we were like, now you need to be on social media, you need to be able to do some of these things for yourself. And truly, you need to be able to be a talker. Whether it's an audiobook, but it's going to be a podcast, that, it may be video. Does anybody have a thought on that?
I'm just going to say, Jason Reynolds, we just finished a very immersive audio thing. And a few years ago, we were doing a speaking engagement in a library. And I remember him saying that he was a reluctant reader growing up. And the idea that a kid can pick up an audiobook and that can bloom this kind of love for reading and storytelling is really important. Like, as Catherine said, giving consumers and kids access to our titles in any way they want to read them or listen to them is really important. And I think audiobooks are helping to grow a whole new generation of readers.
Yodo has had a huge, has had a really cool thing going with their device, and kids collect them. They can trade the cards. And
Tony boxes and Yotos. One of the biggest challenges in our industry has always been like, where does children's audio fit? It's really hard to merchandise that, to sell that. You can't. It's hard to find it. And by the way, parents have to buy it for their kids. These boxes are really helping bring along a whole new generation of readers.
Lee, how do you merchandise children's audio?
Well, I would say kids is really an up-and-coming area. In Q4, we launched Kids Profiles, and we had 22% growth in kids listening in just that period. So it was very exciting, and I think it truly is a great way to introduce young readers and listeners to a whole entire new world and format. And I think the expansion of offerings is really playing a role in that. And what I mean is, before we were very much credit-based, and so people would have to spend their $14.95 credit on a title, and often a kid's title, which is much shorter, they maybe wouldn't want to do that. But now we have all these different models, whether it's all you can listen, cash purchasing, or what have you. It provides a much more easy opportunity for parents to say, you know what, I'm going to get my kids involved in their audible listening.
I think animation is a big part of children's. I have my children's books coming out on June 24th. Your Crown Shines, go get it. But I had my son produce music for the audiobook. My son is 18, shout out to King. And I actually had a friend of mine animate the pages. Dare Coulter beautifully, illustrated the book. And I'm working with Dare to try to convince her to allow me to animate the entire book. Because in the tour I'm doing, I feel like I'm Pippi Longstocking or Mother Goose or some shit, but I cannot wait to get in front of kids. But I'm producing my children's event, like multimedia shows with a DJ, with balloons, with stickers. They're gonna make crowns. There's gonna be craft workshops. So like all the things.
Can I get a ticket to this?
Yes, I'm coming to Jersey.
All right.
Okay.
There's something less intimidating too about audio, right? If you handed your kid a book, it's like for better or worse, it feels like an obligation. You put a pair of headphones, the coolest headphones you can possibly get them, hopefully, not earbuds, with headphones. There's something that's kind of hip about that, or am I wrong?
No, you're right. I mean, and then you have to think about like,
Big can.
communities that don't have libraries. Like this is a real thing. You've traveled. You know, there's spaces you go into. I've been in schools that don't really have a great library at school. There's communities that kids are not even culturally taught about going to a library and taught about the importance of book sharing and community sharing. So audio is a beautiful way to make
Radio is how
accessible. Yeah.
communities that didn't have access to schools were educated, both in the US and around the world.
I mean, it's great for families too. I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and you can only listen to Taylor Swift so many times in the car before you put on an audiobook. But my kids really respond to that, and maybe they don't have the attention span that they will in a few years, but it really does for parents give you other options to kind of keep your kids entertained without just the same songs on repeat and being glued to their iPad. And as a reader, as a reader first and foremost, it's the greatest thing in the world to be able to experience that with your kids.
Those are memories you're creating, right? I remember, I don't know if people know Cracker Barrel, which used to be as a restaurant chain in the South, and you used to be able to, you would go from one Cracker Barrel and you could rent an audiobook and you could return it at the Cracker Barrel down the road. I mean, it's a very strange, sorry, I'm from Texas, so. What's that?
Back in time.
I know. Well, we could talk about the very first audio player from audible.com. But, okay, we're not going back in time. I mean, what other platforms to consume audio are we going to see? Because we're starting to see a lot of wearable devices. We're starting to see, like we said, Yodos. And I'm curious, is there any innovation there? Because I think if you said Yodo was going to be a going concern 5 years ago, I saw it and I thought, that's dead in the water, and I was dead wrong. What are you guys seeing? I mean, are you seeing anybody coming
something that we're doing is
anybody coming through the door with something crazy?
Something crazy.
I want to hear about it.
Yeah, vinyl records. And so we're going to be doing limited edition vinyl with all our poets. That's something I think that's interesting and cool. Vinyl is back, and I've had CDs and I've had vinyl. My vinyl always sold better than my CDs, and everyone's digital is pretty much free if you have a platform like iTunes or whatever. But vinyl is a specific kind of market, and so is poetry, and so we think they go hand in hand.
I mean, I would say, just even on the print side, the explosion that ties in the way you're saying of special edition books with the sprayed edges and the stenciled edges. I mean, people want to celebrate their stories. So, just even if it costs a little, people are willing to pay premium prices to have that tangible object. So, I love that, and to me, it's one-to-one with these special edition hardcovers. People want to celebrate their stories with this kind of cool momentum.
Yeah, we just released a soundtrack by Jason Reynolds. Came out today, 6:30 today. But we actually sent out some influencer boxes, and within those boxes was a vinyl with a couple of chapters from the book. So yeah, vinyl is back. I also think there's really interesting picture books that have devices in them so that a kid can listen and flip pages at the same time. Kind of going back to the old school, listen to the record and beep, turn the page.
What's old is new.
What's old is new. I think it's a great way for kids to listen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the speaker boxes are just incredible because it's also a way to get away from that screen fatigue in a way that all of us are feeling, and I don't think it's any, surprise that kids are feeling it too. So those are amazing, and I think again, it's so specific to the book and just leaning into what that fandom or what that audience, what are their other interests and finding those crossover moments and what's important and special to them. So for those influencer boxes, for those special and elite experiences, in my former life at Pure H Audio, we would go to Comic-Con every year, and so we figured out a way to create a complimentary special edition of the audio that came in this box, and it was on a USB, and there was a Thrawn on there for any Star Wars fans. Big project, but I think just kind of finding those special ways to connect with people and have them connect with the content is just a fun project for all of us.
Also, just to throw out there is, I don't know if anyone's ever seen playaways, which are very cool little devices. If you're in an airport and you need to scoop an audiobook really quickly, they're just a little device that has a full audiobook on it. You can just pop some headphones into it and take it anywhere you want. It's a great way to listen to an audio if you're desperate.
We're seeing a big expansion of the market. And for the market leader, where are we going?
I mean, I can imagine that there are going to be not only maybe advancements in the devices, but also just the way we interact with the books. So I think that there's a lot of possibilities there. I mean, I look back and, we have the Whisper Synchro voice technology, which allows you to experience both the ebook and audiobook together. But I think there's a whole bunch of other ideas that are being worked on that I think we're really working with our creative partners, with our publishers and our authors. Like, how can we help immerse our customers more in the worlds that they are creating?